Got to hit. Okay, great. So I don't see Officer Champa around on
I'm
my.
here.
Oh, you're
I'm
here.
here.
Oh, there you
Hey,
are. Good.
how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Everything's great. Thank you.
So we have a shorter agenda than usual, but I think you're going to find our subjects more than interesting. So why don't we get started with the report from the Boston Police Department?
Sure. Thank you. And we'll be brief. Just a couple things. Nothing was too crazy. April 2nd, around 1:30 in the afternoon, the aquarium, an individual reported that he had parked his car in the parking garage there. And he had a firearm safely and properly secured in his car. The car was broken into and the firearm was stolen out of the vehicle. Report was done, and detectives will be insert that firearm into who had stolen it.
So I will take this to Kathy on Thursday. I'll also get it over to
Martha?
I forget who was hoping to get it through legal and providers or whatever.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, we had a firearm stolen out of his vehicle. That was over in the aquarium. Detectives are on it. Secondly, we had a little issue behind the Harbor Hotel. An individual, I believe, he was trying to attack a woman back there, and when I believe it was the federal police, they attempted to stop this individual, and he jumped into the water, and it was probably cold. It happened. This was March 29th, around 1:30 in the afternoon, and they rescued the guy from the water, luckily unharmed, and brought him to the hospital and got him the psychiatric help that he was in need of. And the woman was okay. And then just lastly, we had on Broad Street, the Hilton Hotel, a valet issue. It seemed as though the guy parked his vehicle, through valet, and an unknown individual approached the valet. Somehow, I believe you're supposed to submit a ticket, so their system appears to be flawed, according to this report, because someone was able to steal the guy's car. I don't know if he had found a ticket maybe on the ground or such. The report doesn't say so, but just to, a heads up on the valet parking over there. It seemed like a pretty nice vehicle that was stolen. And this was on March 23rd, in the middle of the afternoon. That's another case the detectives will be trying to resolve. Other than that, just quite a few, shoplifting is still going on in Faneuil Hall, and we're on top of that, trying to cut it down with police presence. If you guys have any questions, that's really all we have for the Wharf this past month.
No questions, I guess. Glad everything is quiet. Thank you.
Yep, if
Thank
you need
you very much.
Know how to reach. Absolutely, Suzanne. Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye. And we've added something regarding the Armenian Heritage Park. Barbara, there you are. I've made you a co-host. I'm assuming you may have something to share with us. If not, you don't.
I don't.
Okay.
But I wanted to say thank you so very much, Suzanne, for engaging us in this conversation and having us a part of who you are. And this is really to extend a very special invitation to all of you to join us at the park whenever we have programs. They're listed on the Greenway calendar and on the park calendar. And we have an event coming up on May 7th, on Saturday. It starts at 1 o'clock, and it's become really quite a special one for us in that we participate in a worldwide event planned by the Labyrinth Society, where in 40 countries worldwide, in cities and towns, people are walking as one and peace and harmony. And somehow there are certain years when it really holds that much more meaning for all of us. So I ask you all, if you're around on Saturday the 7th, please join us around noon. And then afterward, we have a reception to celebrate all the configurations. As you may or may not know, this year was not reconfigured, so it's a celebration of them all. So that's it for now. We have a series of wonderful Under the Moon with music over the summer, but thank you so much for allowing us to just share what's happening, as we feel you're very much a part of what we're doing.
Well,
Thank you.
anytime you have something you'd like to share with us, please send it along and we'll make sure that we get it to all of our members and they in turn can share it with the folks that they deal with.
We are very grateful. Have a lovely evening, everybody. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Barbara. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I don't know, did anyone have any questions?
Join us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question, Barbara.
Hi.
I've spoken with Don quite a bit, and he's a great guy and
He is.
a wonderful architect.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a reconfiguration at all this year?
I think the
don't-
decision, we're kind of receiving the information as you are as well. And I think the decision was made this year to just sort of hold off and wait till next. So we're
Okay.
being respectful of that. And I think whatever the reason was, that was a decision that was made. But thank you for asking. We're asking the same question, so it's nice to know that
Okay.
others are noticing it as well. So
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. We appreciate it very much.
Well, we appreciate being a part of the neighborhood and very much a part of the community. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Suzanne.
And moving right along, I want to welcome and introduce Audrey Lopez, who is our new director and curator of public art for the Greenway. We are so pleased that she has joined us and our Wharf District community, and hopefully we'll all get to meet her and get to know her and participate in some of the interesting plans that she has for us. Audrey comes from us. I guess you were originally based in California.
Yes, that's right. I am originally from Maryland, so I grew up right around Northeast Maryland, and then I moved out to Southern California. And so I spent 12 years out there and just moved to Boston in September 2021. So I've been here for about 6 months. And I also have to say thank you to everyone, because I actually joined a Wharf District Council meeting way back in October 2021. So I'm excited to be able to update you and fill you all in on what I've been busy with over the past 6 months. So thank you so much for having me. And if it's okay, I'd love to share my screen.
Yes, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to just.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Perfect. Wonderful.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for having me. And I hope this is the last one of these that we have to have online. I hope that I can meet you soon, sometime in person. But yeah, so just as I said, I'm a curator, scholar, and educator, originally from Maryland, then via South America, Spain, and Ghana, made my way over to California, where I spent 12 years really working at that kind of intersection of public art, social practice, which I'll speak a little bit more about today, and spatial justice. And now I'm super lucky to be here in Boston at the Greenway, and excited to share a little bit more about what we have planned for summer 2022 on the Greenway. I have my MA and PhD from the University of California, Santa Barbara. I worked at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Santa Barbara, on a large scale exhibition that really brought public art or contemporary art and design outside of the museum throughout public spaces in Santa Barbara. So that was my first kind of experience where I knew that I wanted to continue to work with public art because of the kind of level of accessibility it has the capacity it has to change people's everyday lives as they're going about their way through the city or the space, and that chance to really support artists in realizing their visions for the public realm. I then worked at the city and county of Santa Barbara, curating public art for them. So very familiar with local government and excited to be kind of back in the saddle with that somewhat at the Greenway, at least collaborating with folks. And then I'm also working currently on an exhibition for the Getty Foundation, which will open in 2024. So love contemporary art. I love working with artists. It's my passion. I love to support them. And it's been really fun to think about new ways of doing that here in Boston. Some of the kind of main values that I bring to my work are these main books right here, but I'll just focus on two of them for now. One is called The Work of Art in the World by Doris Sommer, who was over at Harvard when she was writing this book, really asking like, what can art do in the world? Like beyond looking beautiful or interesting or engaging, what is the kind of larger work that it can do in our communities when it's put outside of those walls of a museum? And then also kind of these two books in the middle, Relational Aesthetics and Education for Socially Engaged Art. I'm really interested in engaging people in that process. So whether it's dialogue through the public art, conversations with artists, how can artists really lead us as we start thinking about these issues that are relevant in our everyday lives? And how can we engage a lot of people in participating in those projects? So that's a little bit of kind of my larger perspective, and I'd be happy to share any more about that at any point. So this year I was really focused on kind of some ideas coming out of these main texts. So emergent strategy, how can we build ideas as we're building the path at the same time? I think it's really relevant to our society as a whole at this moment, and my role at the Greenway at this time. And so I would love to share a little bit about the kind of sneak preview of what's to come, starting with public art in Chinatown. So we will have an artist installing her project in early May 2022 in Mary Suhu Park. Her name is Cheryl Wingzi Wong. She is an architect, designer, and artist based out of New York's Chinatown. And she was selected through an open call process by our associate curator, Sheila Novak, to develop an interactive, playful pop-up pavilion that will be hosted in Mary Suhu area of the park, the farthest away you can get from the Wharf District, to act as a kind of center place for community gathering, to activate through performances, through musicians, through spoken word artists, but to really kind of also be like a community gathering place. So that will be popping up in May 2022. So just a few weeks from now, we have our opening on May 14th if you'd like to join. At that pavilion that Cheryl Wingzi Wong has created, there will be 4 different events that form the Year of the Tiger performance series. And this is connected to the Greenway's already established practice of curating a public art project in connection to the zodiac animal for that year, for the Chinese New Year. This year was the Year of the Tiger. So again, kind of drawing conceptually on that through bold thinking, bold actions, and this performance series. So we are working with the Powell Art Center to co-curate this performance series. And again, it will start on May 14th, and then there'll be one performance lasting throughout the afternoon. So a series of performers in one afternoon each month leading into September. So we're really excited to be co-curating this with a community organization and bringing in this kind of wide variety of acts and performances. I think there's even like, a rock band of 70 and 80-year-olds who are going to join us for part of this. So really thinking about kind of a diverse group of performers and how can we really activate those spaces. For the Dewey Square mural, we are lucky enough to work with a local muralist this year for the very first time, the first Boston native, Boston-born artist to work on the wall with Rob Pro Black Gibbs. It was really beautiful kind of in the conversations that I had with him initially about this project, because as a street artist, as a graffiti artist, as a traditional muralist, someone who's sees the city as their gallery for putting up these large scale pieces of artwork, he shared with me how impacted he had been by the Greenway wall at Dewey Square throughout his career. So he shared that every time a new artist would come and be presented on the mural, he would go see it right away and kind of study it, and how did they do it and how quickly did they do it, how many people did they have working on their team, and that each piece was very influential in his own thinking. So I love this kind of story that it's full circle, and he now has this opportunity himself to paint a large scale mural on the Dewey wall at on the Greenway. And so these illustrations here are of his Breathe Life series. And the one on the Dewey wall will be a continuation of this series. So really celebrating Black youth, Black joy, thinking about Afrofuturism and cosmology. So we're excited to see what he brings to the wall. And that will open at the end of May as well. Connected to murals, but closer geographically to the Wharf District, we have Maria Molteni, who is originally from Nashville, based in Boston, who's developing a large-scale site-responsive ground mural. So a lot of her work is very vibrant, bright colors. In the left-hand corner here on the screen, you'll see an image of the mural, the ground mural she created for the seaport. So she's been really kind of foundational in creating this practice of ground murals and activating the ground in this way. In the right-hand bottom corner, you'll see a kind of a circular mural that she created for the Momentary, where there was oftentimes activated with dance performances or labyrinth walkings that were hosted kind of communally. So she will be designing a piece, or she is currently designing a piece that will be installed on the parcel with the carousel, between the carousel and the Boston Harbor Now pavilions, or the Boston Harbor Pavilion, excuse me. And this will be opening on solstice, so on June 21st, 2022. Again, back in Chinatown, we have Yuan Wu returning with lantern stories. So these were lanterns that were designed through a community engaged process that really tell the history, past and present and future of Chinatown's communities here in Boston. Yuan Wu's been working in Boston for many years. She has an upcoming booth at the Independent Art Fair in New York. So very excited to see her practice grow in that way. And these lanterns, when they came out in 2020, their view time was cut short because of the pandemic. So we're really excited to be able to bring them back for a much longer. They're originally intended on view time. And I'm excited to share that San Francisco's Chinatown has now also reached out to Yuan Wu and commissioned a series of lanterns for their own Chinatown. So this has been kind of a monumental project in the sense that the community has loved it here in Boston, and it's now kind of echoing across the country to other Chinatowns as well. As far as large scale 3D works, we are commissioning a sculpture from Artists for Humanity, which is an organization based out of the Seaport right now that helps youth figure out how to become self-sustaining artists and designers in the world. So we're working with youth from their 3D design studio to create a large-scale sculpture for Parcel 21 that will be installed in late summer 2022, probably August by this point. So these are examples of past works that they've done, but it's been really incredible to see youth kind of leading the way, and I'm excited to incorporate more youth voices in this kind of new vision for the Greenway, thinking about how we can really bring in youth voices as artists, but also as curators. And I think that's really important to engage that generation in the Greenway and envisioning their own realities on the Greenway and making that space their own in some ways. So excited to see what they do. We will be having a site-specific installation of large banners in Wharf District Park. This is on P15 and P16, so where Danny Gordon's large-scale banners are right now, from artist Masuka Berry. She's really interested in joyful kind of text-based affirmation work. So really thinking about, now that this summer is here and we're kind of coming out again after the pandemic, fingers crossed, and people are beginning to take to public spaces again. How can we create public spaces that are welcoming, safe, that feel positive, that are joyful and vibrant? So creating those kind of large scale banners based off of some of her work. And these pieces were from a show that she had at the Boston Center for the Arts in December of this past year, 2021. Finally, I'm really excited to share about this work from an international artist, Wendy Yu. She's from Australia. She's a dancer, a computer programmer, and a choreographer. So really interesting mix of practices. And kind of based on that interdisciplinary take, she's been developing these large scale projected pieces. So working with dancers in the studio to film them, a lot of dancers who have ground-based practices, whether it's breakdancing or whether it's more contemporary art that stays low to the ground, filming them, running it through a computer program that allows the image to be projected large scale and kind of drip down the facade of a large scale building. So we were lucky to have her come visit us in Boston this past February. She worked with a local dance group called The Flavor Continues. So they were able to collaborate like in real time in the studio. She has footage from them that she's now working into these large scale dance installations. We're looking for a variety of sites across the Greenway. Originally, we were thinking the large vent stacks would be perfect places to put work like this. And I think that they will continue to be that in the future. So we're trying to kind of nail down that site right now, but this will be opening in September of 2022, as it's important for it to come out at a time of year when it gets darker earlier in the day. So that will be on view for about 6 weeks throughout the night, and will feature different configurations of her videos that she's putting together. And finally, as a collaboration with the Green Ribbon Commission and Action Pact, we will have a temporary site-specific installation that will pop up around P12 in the Meadow, which is one of my favorite spaces on the Greenway, if I have to pick, as part of this collaboration with Boston's Green Ribbon Commission. So they're having a series of 6 artists do pop-up ephemeral installations throughout the city, beginning right now, actually through June. So these projects will be installed during that time. And we were lucky enough to be asked to participate in that. And so we will have Erin Ginia. She just finished her Master's of Science in Art, Technology, and Culture from MIT in 2020, and has been doing kind of large scale groundworks and other installations throughout Boston, is originally from South Dakota, and is really thinking about, really critically about our relationship with land, earth, ecologies at this moment. So she's working with organic composite compounds. So really thinking about compressing materials really tightly over time, organic materials, and thinking about how those can dissolve into the earth over time in a non-harmful way. So we'll be doing a sort of installation based on those ideas. So all of that to say, we have a really full summer. There's a lot coming. It will roll out over time throughout the summer, so there'll be new things popping up over time. And just kind of as a preview for other things that I'm looking forward to developing this year, really thinking about how the Greenway can become a home for diverse communities in Austin and artists in Boston. So really thinking about how can it be a space where people feel safe, feel excited to come, have a relationship with. How can it continue to be a collaborative lab for experimentation and risk-taking? I think that's a really important piece that's been foundational in the Greenway's public art program that I really want to maintain and strengthen. And then really thinking about the Greenway cohesively. How can it be this dynamic creative corridor for residents, workers, neighbors, and visitors, especially as we come back after the pandemic? These are some of the strategies that I've been starting to implement here, both internally and externally. Doing a serious equity review of our program to make sure that we're up to pace with best practices as far as cultural and racial equity, has already led to changes in our artist fee structure, which has been great to implement. Greater collaboration with our horticulture and programs teams. It's no secret that I have amazing colleagues at the Greenway, and we're really looking forward to kind of strengthening those collaborations moving forward. And then finally, just some ideas for the future, but really thinking about this kind of artist in residency program on the Greenway. Like, is it possible to get artists working in a studio space on the Greenway to kind of increase that engagement and interaction with artists as people walk through the park? And happy to share more about the rest of these ideas at any moment. But I want to say thank you so much for your time. I know I have a tendency to go on about these things, so I will wrap up. Oh, it's not letting me. Let's see. Yes, so thank you so much, and please feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat as well, and I'm open to hearing questions right now. If there's time for that, I can also wait till the end. So thank you.
We certainly have time, plenty of time for questions. So anyone wanna? Oh,
Yeah,
Joanne.
what does it mean, a large-scale annual pavilion?
That's a great question. So if you think about the Serpentine Galleries in London, or you think about some of the parks in Barcelona, or even like going back, way back to the World's Fair, there's a lot of moments where architects and designers have come forward to kind of innovate together and put together large scale pavilions for public spaces. And so in parks, this can be something that happens on an annual basis or a biannual basis that is kind of innovative at the cutting edge of architecture and design, experimenting with materials and form, but really this kind of central beacon that can welcome people in. And whether it's a space to have dance performances, or it's a space to sit and read a book or have a meal, thinking about how architecture can come in and be that kind of drawing point for people in a park. And so there are these kind of like really well-known annual competitions for that. And I think that it would be really neat to think about potentially planning to host one of those here in Boston, at least, you know, to do it, to try it out for a year, to host an open call for qualifications and to see what kind of cool pavilion we might be able to install for the summer season one year. And these also happen on a smaller scale, like pop-up pavilions. So you'll have folks who come in and do like a pop-up pavilion for a week, or there'll be a series of 15 different collections of architects and designers doing these. But thinking about ways of, again, working at that boundary of art, architecture, and design, and really thinking about how that can be innovative and exciting for public spaces.
Thank you.
Joanne, I think you had your hand up.
Did. Thank you, Suzanne. Audrey, I just want to say everything that you presented, you've certainly hit the ground running. And it just all looks so colorful and exciting. And after the 2 years we've been through, I think it's exactly what we need on the Greenway. And I'm really excited about the mural on Dewey Square. I think the colors, the passion, the fun of what he has created in the past. And I think that, you know, some of them have been thoughtful, you know, pensive, but this is just going to burst off and just come alive, I think. So I'm really excited to see that. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I have to give a big shout out to my colleagues at the Greenway for helping me hit the ground running. It would not be possible without them. So that's my associate curator, Sheila Novak, as well as Chris Cook, Rachel, Keelan. They've all been really instrumental, especially Bob as well, our director of maintenance and capital projects, just really helping me understand the park and hit the ground running and be connected with folks. And I do want to invite you all to the opening block party for the mural, which will be June 4th. More details to come. I'll drop that date in the chat, but would be really wonderful to see you there. So I hope to do so.
Audrey, do you make it public when the artwork will be in process of being applied to the to Dewey Square?
Yeah, I don't know if that's actually public, but it's nothing that has to be private. But so he will be installing during the first 3 weeks in May. So he'll have a team of people out there, and his team are other famous muralists from Boston who have their own practices in their own right. So that will be being installed during the first 3 weeks of May. And we gave kind of a 4th week of buffer room just in case we get rainy weather, or for some reason it goes a little slower than we're imagining. You know, these are folks who are used to painting into, you know, the 3 a.m. hours of the night. And so on the Greenway, we have to stop a little earlier than that. So we're expecting probably within 3 weeks, the first 3 weeks of May. But we gave ourselves that extra week of buffer room.
Thank you very much.
I can tell you that before COVID, in the past, there were events. They were small, but there were events that people were invited to as some of the murals were being painted at the painted stages, the beginning of the murals. So that might be something that you'd want to talk to perhaps Keeland about. I know Chris wasn't around then, but they were very interesting. In fact, some people even had an opportunity to, even like one of the artists let people actually paint something on the mural. I mean, it was just,
Cool.
it was really cool. It was like you just slapped some paint on it. It wasn't doing anybody any.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so you may want to talk to somebody about that, because I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, and I think absolutely, like I think that kind of engagement, and I have to thank also our board member Brad Snyder for bringing this idea up as well in our last board meeting. That kind of engagement with community members is really important, to be part of the process or to see the process, and that dialogue with artists is something that I really want to foster and support. So I think kind of creating a moment for that towards maybe the end of the mural painting, once they feel they've made a good chunk of progress,
Right.
is something that I'd love to facilitate. So absolutely, I think we'll probably be coming forward with more details on that. And thank you for the shout out to Keelan and planning that together. I think that would work really well.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I would love to see some kind of information pieces that share with the community the dates for some of these things, because it was such a great presentation and you were giving out different dates for different parks and what was going to happen. I think it would be wonderful if we could put it on our website and share it with, certainly with the Wharf District community, and I'm sure other communities would like to see that as well, so that they could look at the date and say, well, you know, we could go to the Chinatown Park or the North End or whatever. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think that Rachel just wrote in the chat too as well, that we will be sharing details on our website, and then also a later press release that will release these details all together.
Oh,
But
good.
absolutely, I think it's important to get them out there so that people can plan for it. So thank you.
And I know, Suzanne, too, in years past, we've done those like neighborhood specific guides, which we're just finalizing putting together as well. So we'll be able to send something out to the Wharf District Council as well, of kind of all the programs that'll be kind of taking place in your neighborhood, kind of broken down by month as well. So we're just getting those finalized for the season, but you should be seeing them soon.
thank you, Rachel. Thank you. I know there are so many interesting and different types of, as Joanne mentioned, different types of artwork. So this is a really exciting time for us, and it's a great time with people getting out and about more, and hopefully enjoying this summer weather, you know, and meeting and being with other people. So
I hope so. Well, thank you so much for letting me share with you a slice of my world. And I look forward again to the time when we can meet in person this summer. And please do feel free to reach out to me through email. I'd be happy to take a walk along the Greenway, get a coffee. I'm always available. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
and also Rachel may talk more about this, but we can also see you at the gala by the Rings Fountain, right?
That's also true. My first gala. I'm excited for it.
June 9th.
Right, and it's in the Wharf District, so it's a great opportunity to meet you and also a lot of other Greenway folks, as well as their neighbors.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
So, Chris, did you have a question, Chris Fincham?
No.
Oh, okay, your light went on. I thought you did. Anybody else? No. Well, thank you again, Audrey, for sharing this with us. And we look forward to seeing all of your creations, so to speak. Thank you. Okay. I guess moving to our next topic, which is planning for transit connections, well, in Boston, not just the Wharf District, but in the Wharf District area as well. And I don't know if Maya's here. I see Matt.
I am. Hi, Suzanne.
Sure. So thanks very much. I think Maya might be feeling a little bit under the weather, so I can take it from here if that's all right.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you so much, and thanks for having us, Suzanne.
Oh, there she is.
Thank you, Maya. Feel better.
Thank you, Matt. Take it away.
Oh, thanks, Maya.
So Matt, let me make you a co-host. And I want to welcome, this is Matthew Moran, and is William Moose here as well, or?
Maybe put us on mute.
I
I
don't
think you're
think.
stuck with just me tonight.
Just you. So we're fortunate to have you, and you are the Director of Transit Team Planning for the City of Boston. Is that correct?
So correct. I work for the Boston Transportation Department, and my role there is director of the transit team.
Okay. So I'll turn this over to you then, and you can explain what you have in store for transportation in the City of Boston.
I appreciate that. Thanks very much. So I have a brief presentation, and if you'll bear with me, I won't be able to see you while I'm presenting. So if there's any questions or feedback or whatever, please just speak up if you can't hear me or whatever. Again, please just speak up. So I am, share my screen. There we go. If you'll bear with me, I'm gonna put this into present mode. All right. So there we go. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time tonight. My name is Matt Moran. I work, as I mentioned, for the Boston Transportation Department, lead a team here called the Transit Team. So we coordinate closely with the MBTA, with community members, with key stakeholders around making transit better in our city. That typically means working on improving bus traffic and bus travel in the city, but it also means coordinating on better subway station entrances, working with developers on incorporating different transit elements to their projects, and so on. So what we have tonight is a presentation on a corridor that we're hoping to develop with the MBTA to better connect North Station with the Seaport District. So a little bit on the agenda, a little on the study context, what the problem is we're trying to solve, what are our potential routes, what street elements could go into these routes, and next steps and timeline. So a little on the study context, we are very, very early in the outreach process. We haven't had a public meeting on this, but I will talk to you in a second about when we're going to be having that. We are coordinating with key downtown stakeholders around, such as Downtown Big, Greenway Conservancy, Downtown North Association, the Downtown Civics, some key property owners. And we're happy to talk to anyone else that you guys would recommend as well. We are planning an open house on April 28th from 11 to 1 to sort of get the lunch crowd, and then from 4 to 6 to get the after work evening commuter crowd. And that's going to be at 100 Federal Street. So that's in person. And then we're also planning a Zoom meeting on May 3rd at 6:30 p.m. And then we're going to do what we call pop-up events along the way as well. We'll be doing all the translation work in both Mandarin Chinese and Spanish as well. So what we are looking at is a multimodal design, a multimodal corridor between North Station and the Seaport, including better bus, bike, and pedestrian improvements. So this was a key recommendation from Go Boston 2030. It was also included in some other planning work that BTD and BPDA have done recently, such as the North Station Area Action Plan, Seaport Transit Plan, and it will be included in the planned downtown process once that gets started up again. And we are, of course, coordinating with other projects that are happening around downtown, just to make sure that we don't overlap or accidentally plan the same area. So that would be like State Street reconstruction, Downtown Crossing, Bullfinch Crossing, South Station air rights, and the Canal Street work. So this is truly an interagency collaboration between BTD and the MBTA. So BTD, as you might be aware, plans things like the streets, the traffic signals, curb regulations, lane assignments. The T runs all the services. So by partnering together, we can make services on our city streets better for our residents and visitors. And we are also coordinating with other city departments. I won't list them all out here, but if you have questions about specific coordination, please let me know. And we are very early, as I mentioned, in the planning process. So we heard from these different planning initiatives that a missing link in the Boston Transit network is that connection from North Station to the Seaport. And so what we're trying to do now is figure out what the corridor alignment should be. Once we get general consensus around a corridor alignment, we'll start work on the concept design. Once we get general consensus on the concept design, we'll start into detailed design. And then we're several years away at a minimum from any implementation. So that would be 2024, 2025 or later. And so our primary focus is really on infrastructure improvements between North Station and the Seaport, with key transfer points in downtown. So State Street, Haymarket, those big transit hubs. We're assessing how to improve buses, walking, biking, the public realm, and freight connections. And we're doing this in coordination with the MBTA. So this is what we're calling the infrastructure area that is really going to be the core of this study. And then when we look at a service area is a bit more broad, but we are coordinating closely with the MBTA on a new bus route that would be similar to the Silver Line, which would connect Sullivan Square in the north and Charlestown, going to downtown, connecting down past Haymarket, Post Office Square, South Station, and then continuing out to City Point in South Boston. So the T is hopeful that this route could come in line within the next few years, and this would really serve some key missing links in downtown. So if you're trying to get from North Station to, say, Post Office Square or South Station, you could ride this. It would be a one-seat ride. If you are attending a convention, say you're from out of town, you want to get to Faneuil Hall, this would be a one-seat ride. So I think we're pretty excited about this new route and what this could mean. But as I said, the route has to have good infrastructure. So that's what we are planning. So why do we focus on transit at BTD? Well, I think this graphic helps to sum up a lot of what we're trying to do. So if we are trying to plan with a very limited amount of space in downtown, which is really what we have because it's a very constrained environment, you can see sort of what you can do with 50 pedestrians, 50 cyclists, 50 people in a bus, or 50 people in 33 cars. If we're trying to plan for this limited amount of space, the best way to do it is with transit in a lot of ways. So quickly on what are our identified challenges, and I'm going to sort of go through this quickly just for the sake of time. We identified these challenges through discussion, through sort of in-depth analysis and data review, by looking at past plans and policies and what they've discussed, through past community engagement, and through some recent stakeholder discussions. And so these really break down to three main categories. So the first are missing crosstown connections. So from North Station to South Station and then to the Seaport. The missing transfer points in downtown. It's really difficult to transfer from a bus today to the subway in a lot of cases. They don't really match up very well. And then the crosstown bike connections aren't really great in a lot of ways. Next is transit service issues. So reliability is typically hit by bad congestion. So if you're trying to take a bus, it might take you 5 minutes one day, it might take you 20 minutes the next. It really just depends on how bad the congestion is. The legibility of the downtown bus network is not very good. So if you know you need to get on that one bus to Charlestown and you can go to Devonshire and Milk, you can get on that bus. But in a lot of ways, you sort of have to seek it out. It's not really that clear or straightforward. And we also know that there's a lot of bus layover facilities. They're sort of scattered about downtown, which is not the most efficient use of our curb space. If we want to think through ways to reallocate some of that curb space for loading or restaurant space or public realm, there's different things that we could think through. And the area characteristics. So the first is there will be a massive growth in jobs and residents in the Seaport between now and 2030. And I'll go through that in a minute. As a city, we have different mobility goals, which is shifting more people from sort of single occupancy vehicles and into other modes. Not everyone, obviously, not everyone's going to want to, but some people will choose to. And then we have certain street designs that aren't necessarily conducive to good bike, pedestrian, transit facilities today. So as mentioned before, some missing downtown connections. So if you're trying to get from, there is no good connection today between downtown and the Seaport unless you're coming right from South Station. In many cases, it's a kind of arduous trip. So if you're trying to make the 2-mile trip today from North Station to the Seaport, it can take you about 26 minutes and it involves 2 transfers. So it's not very straightforward in a lot of ways. The connections to key transfer hubs are difficult. It's difficult to reach North Station, Haymarket, State Street, and other major downtown hubs. Missing bike connections. So we know that there's a lot of bike connections that aren't really clear or straightforward today. And we know that there's demand for more of these bike connections just for safety, and there's demand for a lot of blue bike infrastructure. And it's also important to think through neighborhood growth. So by 2030, we anticipate the Seaport will have about 31,000 residents, which is equivalent in size to Hyde Park and larger than Alston, Rosendale, Back Bay, or Mattapan in population. And this is a big increase from where we were forecasting it would be back in 2013. Back in 2013, the estimate was about 11,000 residents, but because the growth has been so much higher than was anticipated, we're now looking at a much higher number. The same thing goes for jobs. Back in 2013, we were anticipating about 37,000 jobs in the Seaport. Now by 2030, we are anticipating about 89,000 jobs in the Seaport. The Seaport will become Boston's second largest employment hub after downtown Boston and ahead of the Back Bay. So for comparison, downtown has about 178,000 jobs. Back Bay has about 52,000 jobs. So this will quickly become the second largest employment hub in the entire state. So creating better transit connections there is vital to that area being a sort of livable, vibrant place, but also vital for people who are coming from downtown and trying to reach destinations in the Seaport and vice versa, of course. So we looked at 5 different corridor alternatives, and I'll go through those in a second, but I want to spend a few minutes to talk through what we believe is the preferred route, and then talk a little bit about the other corridors that we identified. So the corridor concept that we are looking at now as our preferred route uses Merrimack Street to reach Haymarket. And at Haymarket, there's a transition from Merrimack to Congress. It sort of feels like the same street, but the street name changes. So we continue down Congress Street to State Street, so past Faneuil Hall, past City Hall to State. We have to do some more engineering work to think about the Post Office Square area because of the way the bus would have to turn, the street directionality issues down there. But we think that some combination of Federal, Congress, and Pearl for both northbound and southbound service would make sense to get, and then we would get to High. High Street would probably have to become two-way for a certain part of its route. And then we would look for buses to turn onto Summer and get to South Station. So again, if you were trying to go from South Station to Haymarket or to North Station, this would be a very clear and legible one-seat ride. And we are hopeful that this will enable a 10 to 12 minute trip between those 2 points. So if you remember back to that 26-minute trip that I mentioned before, this would hopefully bring it down to 10 to 12. So this is the route that we're hoping to go with, provided that we get decent feedback from stakeholders like yourselves and at the public meeting. Now, we looked at some other bus corridors, and I'm not going to go through these in too much detail because there's a lot here. We looked at a bus corridor on Tremont Street, but we opted against that for a variety of legibility issues and because it doesn't really hit some of the key downtown employment hubs. We also looked at a bus route along the Greenway, and we opted against that because of issues with congestion at the 93 on-ramp, off-ramps, and because it doesn't go through some of the major employment hubs in downtown, like Post Office Square. And then we also looked at a dynamic bus route, which would use more of a GPS system to navigate around downtown Boston. We opted against that because we didn't think the legibility would be very good, and we thought people would get confused if the bus was showing up at one station or another, depending on the time of day. So we opted for what we thought was the simplest connection possible. So very quickly, what elements would go into these routes? I'm just going to talk through a few priority elements from a architecture standpoint, and we would look to incorporate these in the next round of design. So the first thing would be thinking through bus priority in city streets. So thinking about bus lanes, what we call queue jumps at intersections, thinking through street directionality. So is the street going one way, two way, and then thinking through things like transit signal priority. We also look at transit stops. So having a really high degree of amenities at these transit stops. So good shelters and seating, signage, so you know where you're going, enhanced lighting, countdown clocks, and emergency call boxes. So if you've been out to a recently completed project in Jamaica Plain, Roxbury that we just did, this is what it looks like on the right. It looks a lot more like what we would call a light rail station, than it does a typical bus station. And you can see, you know when your bus is going to show up, you have a good place to wait, it's clean, safe. So we would look to emulate a lot of the characteristics of this with our project. We would also look at having good transfer points. So today, if you're trying to transfer from a bus to the subway, you might have to cross the street. It might be indirect. In a lot of cases, you probably have to, if it's a rainy day, make a sprint or put up an umbrella. It's not a really good experience today. So what we would look to have are covered walkways, bus stops really designed for passenger comfort, good wayfinding signage, real-time arrival screens, improve the ADA accessibility, again, to enable you to have a good transfer from the bus to the subway. Next, we would look to work with an architecture firm and with key stakeholders around design for the bus stops. So we would look to have different public art and placemaking features, different historical markers, and different things to really highlight and emphasize the sort of Boston, the sort of location, the history of these stops. This on the right is Phoenix. We are not looking to emulate Phoenix by any means, but they did some really interesting things on the Phoenix Light Rail network with station design, working with local artists, working with local landscaping. And a lot of those ideas are things that we would like to bring into this project. Next, we would work with our active transportation team on enhancing downtown's bike network through things like adding locations for blue bike stops, protected bike lanes and intersections, and the like. Next, we would work with you all, the BPDA, and some other key stakeholders around enhancing the sort of pedestrian experience. So that would be things like making everything ADA accessible, having wider sidewalks where possible, with street trees, landscaping, and better environmental design, having benches and public art where we can, and working with the folks from the Freedom Trail to really enhance the Freedom Trail in the locations where we're working. We are looking at a loading and delivery strategy as well, knowing that these are key elements to any sort of urban, vibrant neighborhood. We would try and work with key abutters and stakeholders to understand what the needs are at the curb. So whether that's having a loading zone or pickup drop-off zone for an Uber or a Lyft, or flexible curb space depending on the hours of the day, we would look to have something on a case-by-case, block-by-block sort of setup. And then finally, for maintenance, we would consider an independent maintenance contract because we have a lot of infrastructure that would need to be maintained here in terms of shoveling, in terms of the public art elements. And we want to make sure that we continue to coordinate with key stakeholders around any emerging needs on as the project gets built and as it evolves over time. So one more slide. I'll take any questions that you all have. So for our next steps, we are having the public meeting at the end of this month. Assuming we have general consensus, we'll begin to develop concept plans, and we'll hopefully be back in September, maybe October, to talk about those concept plans and get additional public feedback on those. Going into the fall of 2022 and early 23, we would start to advance into later stages of design. Again, assuming we get positive feedback from stakeholders, the public, and so forth. And then late 2023, advance these plans into a later stage of design, 100% plans, as we would call them. So that is it in a nutshell. I am happy to take any questions or hear any thoughts you all might have.
Thank you, Matt. This is Norm Meisner at Harbor Towers. I do have a couple of kind of questions, observations, if I may. When you talked about your constituents that you're helping, you talk about bus, bike, and pedestrian. And I'm very much a fan, and I love what you're doing for improving rapid transit through the district. I think it's a great thing to be able to do. But I think there's another constituency that I don't see you talking about, and that are the drivers, the people in cars. They use your streets also, and it's while all the others are important, minimizing the use of the streets by the cars ends up with problems like what we anticipate State Street to be once COVID is, better in hand and people start returning to the downtown. So, I would ask that you would increase your constituency to include the people who have to drive through these neighborhoods because we live here. The second comment is in the area of the partners that you have. You talked about the MBTA being a partner, which is again great. But I would suggest that the public safety organizations in the city need to be partners as well. And the reason I bring this up is because the emphasis on bike lanes and bikers works great if there's some enforcement of that. And there is no enforcement going on. So bikers are all over the streets. Sometimes they're in the bike lanes. More frequently, when I do see them, and there's not a lot, they're on the streets. They do not obey any traffic laws, with rare exception. There are certainly several courteous bikers out there. But it's almost to the point where crossing Seaport Boulevard, walking down Atlantic Avenue, I'm more worried about being hit by a bike than I am about being hit by a car at this point. And so, I would encourage you to engage the public safety groups within the city of Boston as part of your deliberations on what you're doing. But again, the mass transit piece, I absolutely applaud. I think that's great.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the sort of the point about mass transit. So I think to your point about cars, and we're still developing the presentation and for the public meeting in a couple of weeks, and these stakeholder meetings are exactly what I want to hear. So a few things. So we will certainly be doing a robust traffic analysis as a part of all of this, and we know that's necessary. We know that's urgent. We'll certainly be considering things like garage entry points and access points, the interstate highway, sort of where those on ramps and off ramps are. There's a lot of those things that we're going to have to consider as part of this process, and we certainly will. So I think that's a good nuance to put in there, is that these are all things that will be a part of the thought process, and sort of that sort of decision-making process. And but one thing just to note, so if you look at surveys, about 25% of the traffic in some parts of the city are Ubers or Lyfts, and that's a huge number of cars. If you look at surveys of the people who are riding in Ubers and Lyfts, about half of them would have taken public transit if public transit were more convenient, more reliable. There's sort of like a laundry list of things that people give for why they might have chosen to take a Lyft or an Uber over taking the T. And if you sort of think about, we could probably move a lot of those people back onto the T if we have good, reliable transportation services. And that means that if you're driving from a residence, like at Harbor Towers or another part of the Wharf district, this could potentially have a better traffic impact if we were able to shift some of those people back onto the T and back onto public transit. So I think that's a good sort of framing, because at the end of the day, we know that sort of how this impacts residents and how this impacts business owners in this area. There's going to be some change. There's going to be some sort of impact to traffic circulation, but we think that there'll be a lot of ability to shift some people away, some percentage of traffic away, and hopefully, recapture some of those Uber or Lyft trips for transit. And not to keep throwing percentages at you, I'm sorry, I'm a data nerd at sometimes, but a 5% drop in traffic volume can lead to a 20% decrease in congestion. If you sort of look at how traffic modelers look at sort of cities and at regions. So by shifting some of those trips away, we think we can have a pretty positive impact on congestion. On the partners point, I think the public safety point is a good one. And we've worked with public safety agencies for a lot of our other projects too. On the cycling thing, I'll have to check back in with our active transportation team to get a better sense from them of the enforcement. I know enforcement of bus lanes has been something we've been trying to coordinate on, and I think we've been making some progress on it, particularly on Brighton Ave and on Columbus Ave, where we've done some projects lately. But yeah, I think working closely with A1 and sort of the the fire department and ambulance services will be key to this project being a success as well. One thing that we think is a positive is that if we do install bus lanes, a sort of benefit is that emergency vehicles can use bus lanes to respond to emergencies. So it becomes essentially like an HOV lane for emergency vehicles to get to and from locations quickly if they're able to use those bus lanes. So that's I think a positive win for safety, and it's something that when we were out on Columbus Ave a few weeks ago, we saw there was a car accident a few blocks off the corridor, and we saw an ambulance and a police car both go up the bus lane very quickly to get to that accident. So we think these can have a positive impact in that regard.
Matt, could you go back to the slide which shows the proposed route?
Certainly, if you'll bear with me for a second. Here we go.
Okay, I know we had talked about this earlier, and I'm just wondering if people here can see exactly what impact this could have on the Wharf District. My question to you is, all of our residents are located around, more or less centered around the Greenway. For our residents to take a bus, it's going to mean they're going to have to walk up to Congress Street, correct? I mean, if I live in Harbor Towers and I want to get to the seaport, I'm going to have to walk up to Congress Street to catch the bus.
Yeah, so this is a bus that doesn't exist today. So that is one sort of point I'd like to make. But yes, the idea would be if you lived, I think that's probably a 4 or 5 minute walk to the Greenway on Franklin Street. So if we put a station stop at Franklin and Pearl or Franklin and Congress, I think those would be the easiest stops to get to. If there was a stop at State Street, that might serve some folks that are in sort of the Broad Street area, I would imagine.
Got a couple questions in the chat from Bradley Snyder.
See if I can see the chat.
I can read them out. Bradley asks, will there be dedicated funding for ongoing maintenance and any update on a new bridge to the federal courthouse?
Really good questions. So thank you very much, Maya. I'll take the second question first, which is the Northern Avenue Bridge. Unfortunately, I don't have any updates on that. I know our leadership are looking at different options and alternatives for that corridor, design, iterations. I know the costs have gotten a little higher than folks were anticipating. So I think there's some folks that are looking into that at sort of different pay grade than me. And then, sorry, what was the first? Oh, and then maintenance. Yes, that would be the goal, is that we would have a dedicated funding pot for maintenance. We are talking to colleagues in Alexandria, Virginia, who recently built a bus corridor that would be similar to this. And they have an independent maintenance contract that they say works really well. And I think the goal would be we'd emulate that model to have an independent maintenance contract for this corridor as well, to maintain some of the more specialty items. Some of the items on here we can maintain from our general operating budgets and operating staffs, but some of them will be a little bit more specialized. So we definitely want to consider an independent maintenance contract for part of this.
I have a quick question, Catherine Wooters from Harbor Towers. Are there currently bus lanes in both directions on Congress Street?
Yes, so that's related to Bullfinch Crossing. So they they sort of kicked the T out of the Haymarket bus garage, and they got relocated over to Congress Street. So to enable that operation to operate efficiently, the developer worked with my team and worked with our construction management team on a plan to sort of put those bus lanes in place. The project that we're looking at here would potentially remove those bus lanes or would potentially reallocate some of that space. We still have to work on that design, but that's certainly an option that we would consider.
Thank you.
Suzanne? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, this is Sheila Willard from Intercontinental, and I have a comment that sort of tags on to what Norm Meisner said, which has to do with the working with other agencies, because I think it's very, very important that we start thinking about emergencies. I hate to say this, people who know me are tired of hearing it. We have to think about how do we get those 31,000 people projected to be in Seaport out to the seaport if need be. And I've seen a number of presentations, not necessarily from you, but others regarding transportation. And we as a city really, really have to start thinking about that. Seriously, what are you gonna do? So just throw that into the mix, please.
Yeah, certainly. So disaster planning and disaster operations, certainly something we can consider. A little bit of my background before getting into transportation planning, I worked in sort of the Homeland Security field. I worked for the New York Police Department's counterterrorism division, and then worked as a contractor for different Homeland Security projects. So I'm familiar with this sort of work, and it wasn't something we had considered as part of this project for the bus lane, but it's definitely something we could talk about with some of my colleagues who are doing some of the emergency planning from OEM, and see if there's anything they would want to incorporate into this project.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, I have another question. Is this the bus route that is supposed to satisfy the need for getting folks from the seaport to North Station? Is this because I know when the Northern Avenue Bridge was going up, there was, going up or being discussed, there was a lot of conversation about the need to get folks who work in Seaport but have transit requirements in North Station. And there was no connection between the two, except buses that private businesses were utilizing. Is this lane designed to fill that need?
For the most part, yes. So this is really that connection that would fill the need for folks who are going from the Seaport District to the Orange Line, to the Green Line, to the Blue Line, and to the commuter rail at North Station. So if you're coming into South Station today, you have pretty good access to the Seaport by way of the Silver Line or just by walking over the 4-Point Channel. If you're coming from any of the other subway lines, if you're coming from the commuter rail at North Station, it's a really, really bad connection. So this would be that primary connection. With that said, there's probably going to be some other transit services, either run by the MBTA or run by private operators, that could potentially use the Moakley Bridge or potentially use the Northern Avenue Bridge if that has transit on it. So there's definitely some other corridors, but they wouldn't be that as frequent. They probably wouldn't be as high capacity. They would be more locally serving. So one other example of this is there's an idea for a Seaport Circulator, which could bring folks from different points in the Seaport into downtown. You know, one of those like 20-person vans that you might see operating in some suburban locations. That's another idea that could potentially use some of that Northern Ave or Moakley Bridge, you know, sort of infrastructure.
So would this be an extension of the Silver Line, or would this be its own color? Like, would this now be the, I don't know, we're running out of colors here. The gold line or something?
The line, the platinum line.
Right.
So we are working with the T on branding. We would not call this the Silver Line, but we're hopeful it could be called something else. We just want to get that right. So if you guys have any thoughts on either a color or name, we'd love to hear it. The harbor line, you know, the crosstown line. I think we're open to different suggestions.
I think Matthew Murphy has a question, then I can go. We have our hands raised.
Thank you. This is Matthew Murphy here from Boston Harbor City Cruises. Thank you, Matt. I came in a little late to this, so sorry I missed the first part of your presentation. My question may be a little outside your lane, if you'll forgive the pun, but there is currently a ferry service that is being provided between Seaport and Lovejoy Wharf, next to very adjacent to North Station. And there's also, but all of the passenger vessel services that are used for commuter purposes, except for the Charlestown shuttle, which is something that we operate to the T, going from Long Wharf to Charlestown. All the other services are either privatized or subsidized in some way. And we have a small but hearty water taxi operation that has little boats zipping around the harbor from place to place. So I think, I mean, I don't want to go too far afield from your presentation, but I do think that the city should look at perhaps finding ways to support water transportation in connecting these two areas, and including the Wharf district in that triangle. I mean, our water taxis go back and forth to East Boston and Charlestown. It's not a very efficient system because it's an on-demand system, but have you, I guess my question is, have you looked at the impacts that the Seaport to Lovejoy ferry has had? Is that helping in any way to alleviate, folks who may have been taking an Uber or other means of transportation to get to North Station or vice versa?
You're on mute. Oh.
Thank you. So a couple thoughts. The first one is we just completed a transit plan called the South Boston Seaport Strategic Transit Plan. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but if you Google Seaport Transit Plan, it should pop up. And that includes a pretty significant water transportation section that talks about some Long Wharf and Lovejoy Wharf to Seaport ferry connections. So I think that we are certainly thinking about that because we know, given Boston's history as a waterfront city and given that the harbor is such an untapped resource, that these are very viable and important connections that can and should be made. And we took a lot of direction from the Boston Harbor Now plan for the waterfront that included a pretty robust sort of connection into the Seaport District from points in downtown and then the region as a whole. So I would encourage you to Google that plan and check out some of the connections that were recommended. And I will say, we are not formally taking comments anymore, but we are still wrapping the plan up. So if you have any questions or feedback, I'll leave my email in the chat. Please reach out to me directly on that. Second point is we are coordinating closely with the Convention Center Authority, who is running that ferry service. They are, I think they're still seeing ridership that was sort of below pandemic levels. And I think, though, as people start to come back to the Seaport District, return to offices, that ridership will pick up, and they anticipate it'll pick up. To a certain extent, I think this service that you're seeing on the screen and the service being run by the Convention Center can be complementary. And I think there's a few reasons for that. First off, if you're trying to get to this area of the Seaport where my mouse is, it's kind of a little bit off the map. So the area by the ICA or the courthouse, it's a little far away from Summer Street. So the Summer Street corridor will really serve the need of people who are trying to get to the Convention Center. And we're anticipating about 10 million square feet of development along the Summer Street corridor. So it'll serve that need for Summer Street. It's about a half mile, maybe a little bit more, up to the ferry terminal by the ICA. So we think those are maybe two different markets. The second need it serves is the transfer from Haymarket, the transfer at State Street for Blue Line, Red Line, Orange Line passengers who are trying to get out to the seaport. So again, it's a little bit of a different market, and we think that they can both be complementary with one another.
Thank you.
Hey, Matt Rubens. I'm at Harbor Towers as well. Maybe building a little bit on what Norman said before. I do applaud the attempt to try to move people onto mass transit. That's certainly great. The challenge in the real world, though, is that people still love, as we know, their cars, and a lot of traffic that we see, at least on Atlantic Avenue in that area, is commuter traffic, people coming in. There is some transit traffic, but a lot of it are people who are coming and leaving to more distant destinations than this corridor. And my fear is, frankly, that if you put this corridor here, which effectively deflects cars off it, it'll all get moved over onto Atlantic Avenue. And we're going to see an even worse set of congestion there than we have now, which is unacceptable. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about that, but what I would ask is that you provide some transparency into the traffic studies that you're doing. We have, as you know, been working with your office and other people, and with Howard Stein Hudson and others, to try to get a sense for what traffic will look like in the current and future state of this area. There's a lot of assumptions in those that we at Harbor Towers have not necessarily agreed with. We'd love to have a dialogue and understand exactly what you think, or what you expect traffic conditions will be in our area based on this change. Second comment or question is, and I don't know if you're taking this as an opportunity to review things like light timing, bike lanes throughout the rest of the district, because those are, as you identified, certainly with respect to bike lanes, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement throughout the whole district, not just along this corridor.
Sure. So your two questions were around bike lanes and then also around traffic. So as I mentioned before, and if you were here before and I'm the broken record, please stop me. We're going to be doing a robust traffic analysis to understand sort of demand in this corridor, how it might shift over to other corridors, and also how some people, because realistically, some people are going to shift modes if they have an easier trip across town. So if you're taking an Uber now from North Station to get to the seaport, there's probably a good chance you're going to switch to a different service if a better service is available to you. As mentioned before, statistically, about half of Uber trips were originally mass transit trips. So there's a good chance that we can get some of that traffic to shift. And if a quarter of the traffic in some parts of the city are Uber and Lyft trips, then half of that, 12%, 13% of traffic might be able to shift. So we think that's a big opportunity to move some people who might otherwise decide to take a TNC to a different mode. And a few examples of this, anecdotally, we've heard from some folks in the North End who don't have a good transit connection to the seaport today, and on a regular basis take an Uber during rush hour to the seaport. So that might be a trip that we could convert over to mass transit. Some people are definitely still going to drive, and we sort of need to reflect that. But for a lot of these more local trips, we anticipate that some number of those trips will shift.
I understand. Just a quick follow-up, not to interrupt you. But I heard that before, and again, we would love, as you said, with respect to whatever assumptions you're making, that you share those with the people who actually live here. Just as one example, and we've beaten everyone up enough about State Street, but even when we saw the presentation about the new Northern Avenue Bridge, and we asked about a traffic study, none had been done. And it was given the proximity of a lot of everything that had been proposed about that, we didn't see any analysis of the impact on Atlantic Avenue from a whole new corridor being created. And again, I'm very excited to see the new moves that the city's making with respect to holistic planning. I think that's fantastic. Maybe this is an outgrowth of that, but we haven't necessarily seen a holistic view of the impact of these changes on the entire area. We see a lot of spot, it's the equivalent of spot zoning.
Yeah, so I guess two other data points for you. So the reason we know that some people will change is because we've seen it with recent projects. So on Brighton Avenue, we installed new bus lanes, and we saw a 13% reduction in traffic and about an 8% increase in mass transit ridership. So not one for one. Some people are probably using other corridors. Some people are probably traveling at different times of the day instead of during the peaks. But there is a significant shift. And then same with when Boston Landing opened. Boston Landing resulted in about 20%, and that's in Brighton. It's a new commuter rail station that opened, gosh, what, 2016. We saw about a 20% drop in some of the traffic at some of the intersections around Boston Landing, which again, we attribute to some people who shifted mode. So I think there can be a shift, and we really want to make sure we account for that. And yeah, to your point, we'll make sure that any of the data and traffic analysis is transparent in sort of the way it's presented to this group and other associations that we're working with. And happy to have like a follow-up conversation too, if you have some thoughts about past work that's been done incorrectly or or could be done better.
We can't change the past. We can only make things better in the future. Thank you. I appreciate your responses.
Oh, and sorry, on bikes. I missed your response on that. So we will certainly look at bikes in this corridor. Just given my role as the transit director, I can't really look at bikes district-wide, but I can certainly look at bikes within the corridor I'm planning. So that's sort of where I'm a little stuck on that.
I have a question regarding the traffic studies. I know that places like Brighton, you're focusing on a highly residential area. So when you talk Brighton Ave, here we have a mix of workers and residents. The COVID has really had an effect on traffic with respect to the workers. They're not coming to work, or they're coming sporadically. So the traffic has been greatly reduced. Your traffic studies, are they going to take that into consideration, that these studies are not necessarily reflecting what's actually going to happen in the future when workers start to come back? Or how are you dealing with that COVID, non-COVID issue?
So that's a good question. I don't have an answer to that just yet. We're going to have to think through that in a little bit of detail in the next round of analysis. So I think there's a legitimate case to be made that the traffic counts that we would collect today are probably lower than they would be otherwise. I think there's another case to be made that maybe the counts from like 2019 are higher than they will be in the future. So I think we have to think through exactly what a reasonable assumption would be that maybe blends the two of them or something, to understand what the implications could be. Open to any thoughts and ideas. We're also going to consult with our consulting team, which is HDR Engineering, who are sort of well respected for their traffic analysis, and there might be some other precedents we could look to either in the Boston area or from work that they've done nationally. I will say too, the Brighton example, a lot of Brighton is very residential. Parts of Brighton are very, very commercial and sort of do a lot of shops, restaurants. And so as part of Brighton Ave that we worked on is a mix of a lot of shops, restaurants, some offices, and then sort of residential to a certain extent too. So not apples to apples, of course. No neighbor is apples to apples with each other, but there might be some comparison there.
We've got one more question in the chat asking how many buses are going to be on this route.
Sure, thank you, Maya. So we are anticipating that there'll be one primary bus route that uses this corridor, and that'll be that new one. We're anticipating it'll operate every 3 to 4 minutes during the peak, and then every 10 minutes or better off peak. So kind of similar to what you see on the Silver Line today. We are also anticipating the number of the express buses and other routes that feed into downtown will use parts of the route to get to other places in downtown. So for example, the express buses that lay over on Federal Street today might use this corridor to get over to Haymarket and lay over at Haymarket. So they would pick up and drop off passengers along the way as they're moving through downtown. So I think there'll be a high level of bus traffic, which is good if you're trying to get places in downtown. There are different examples of this across the country. Denver has a really good transit mall that you can look at where it's a lot of service that gets funneled into downtown along one central corridor. So I can see this being something similar to that.
Are private bus services allowed to use this corridor?
We would, so we would only allow private services to use the corridor if they're open to the public. So let's say it's that Seaport Circulator and it's open to the public, we would allow those buses to use it. We would also allow a, say, convention center shuttle that's going out, and serving the convention center to use it. Or if Massport, we're running a Logan shuttle, we would allow them to use it. I don't think we would want a lot of like tourist trolleys to use it, just because we want to move a lot of Boston residents, people who work in the city. We want to move them efficiently, and we don't want to clog up this corridor too much.
So then school buses or the duck
buses
boats
also,
or the
Thank you.
trolleys, they're all going to have to be on the street versus the bus lane.
So school buses would certainly be allowed to use it, and thanks for that clarification. That's one point we've made for our other routes as well, is that school buses can and they do use it. I think trolleys we would look to exclude just because they're not really public transit, public serving routes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
All right. Well, it's been a
Matt.
pleasure chatting with you guys. My email's in the chat if you want to contact me directly, but looking forward to working with you all in the future. And yeah, thanks again for having us.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Meyer, both of you. And we really appreciate this information. This is very informative, and I'm sure there'll be more discussion in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
So if no one has any additional questions or discussion on the transportation proposal, I'd like to ask Joanne Hayes-Rhines, who I believe wants to talk about Friends of Christopher Columbus Park and what's going on.
Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate that. Yes, it's just as the Greenway is looking forward to an explosion of color and activity, we're doing that too, coming back in Columbus Park with all of our activities. We've had to limit them, of course, keep people socially distanced, or in quite a few cases, just eliminate different events. But I just wanted to tell you about a few things that we're doing and kind of the energy that's coming back. This is more North End related, but we're having, for the first time, we're supporting a create your own window box program for a weekend in May 13, 14, where people can bring their window boxes, and for a small amount of money, our horticulture team will help them plant, pick out the flowers. When you look at gorgeous window boxes in the North End, we'll help them create something of their own. So that's the kind of outreach we're trying to do to the community. Also, one of our favorite events is our membership social, and we haven't had it for 3 years. It'll be at Tia's, and it's a free event for members, $10 at the door for non-members. Obviously, we're trying to attract new members, but it's also a good way for people to meet neighbors. And so many people have been so isolated that this has always been a great turnout. In fact, I remember that's how I met Joe Christo at one of our socials. So that is on May 25th at Tia's at 6 o'clock. So I hope people will come out and meet some new neighbors. We'll continue with our Independence Day celebration on June 25th. It'll be expanded well, I guess we just did it last year and it was quite small. So we'll not only bring it back to what it was, but even bigger. We will have our Sunday night movies again, and we'll actually start our season with our Tot Lot open house in early May, which means we pay to have the landscaper come, take out some of the old sand from the playground, and then put in new sand and clean it up. And then we just have an open house with pizza that's donated, and maybe get the fire truck to come and just entertain the neighborhood kids. And again, it's a community outreach. And right now, if you go to the park, excuse me, you'll see on the corner of Richmond.
You want to get some water?
Just got a little frog in my throat. And on the corner of Richmond and Commercial Street is a tree that one of our members has deemed to be the Ukraine tree. And it is decorated in yellow and blue flags, and people have left different comments, like painting rocks that say peace, and just showing support and solidarity for what's happening to the citizens of Ukraine. So that's really sweet. But I hope all of you are members or would consider being members of the Friends of Christopher Columbus Park. Just as the Greenway, we can certainly use everybody's support. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanne. I don't have anything to report on what's happening with the State Street project. I will tell you that some of us are meeting with the Boston Transportation Department folks at the beginning of May, and we hope to have, and we've been talking about having them at our May meeting. So that would be, I believe it's the 17th. So did someone say something? Oh, so yeah, May 17th. So hopefully we'll have something on that to report at the next meeting. I don't have anything else on my agenda. Does anyone want to say anything or update the folks on what's going on? Judy.
Hi, Suzanne. Hi, everybody. Judy Ehrlich here. I just wanted to kind of follow up on Audrey's presentation, which just shows us how much is going to be going on the Greenway, and tell everyone that we're going to come together again after 2 years of not getting out there and helping beautify the Greenway. And so we have a volunteer date set for Wharf District residents, members, friends to come out for an hour and a half and work on some gardening tasks on the Greenway. You know, many of us have really found that place to be a refuge over the last 2 years, and they have done a great job despite the circumstances, keeping it up. So Thursday, June 23rd, 5:30 to 7 p.m. We can have 30 or more people. We have come close to that, I think, only once, but lots of pent up demand, right? So yes. please plan to come out. Afterwards, we will gather at Trillium for pizza and drinks and spend some time with one another and hopefully celebrate a new season and a little bit of joy and beautification. We will send a flyer, but in the meantime, I've put my email address in the chat, and if you're ready to commit now, please, it's not a big risk. Send me an email and let me know that you wanna come out that night. We are not going to schedule a rain date. It's just too complicated. If the Greenway cancels, they cancel, and then each of us could perhaps find a time as an individual to get out there and help during their weekly volunteer shifts. So again, Thursday, June 23rd, 5:30 to 7. You'll get a flyer. We hope everyone will at least be able to RSVP by the 13th of June so that we have an idea of how many people we have. Thank you.
Any questions, anybody? Hope to see a lot of these friendly faces on the 23rd. They're always just a good time, and it's not really a lot of heavy lifting, believe me.
And just to be clear, this is not just for Wharf District Council members. Anyone who lives or works or in the neighborhood or just enjoys the Greenway and wants to join our group.
Good point. Anybody else want to share with the group anything? Matthew, how is Boston City Cruises doing this summer?
We're doing well. The seas have been a little unpredictable. We've had to cancel some whale watches. Tomorrow, for example, we're not going out. Just it can look fine in the inner harbor, but you get out to Stellwagen Bank and it's just whoa. So that's been a little, but we are now running our historic harbor cruises daily. May 16 is when the Provincetown ferry starts service to Provincetown, and you know, we sort of gradually ramp up as we get closer to Memorial Day. But one thing I will tell you is that we are seeing visitors from all over the country, and even starting to see more international visitors than we were seeing certainly last year. So definitely seeing a pickup in that area. Seeing more groups that are booking on board the Odyssey and dinner cruise. And so we are optimistic about the summer, and still operating very safely and carefully. And yeah, looking forward to a good summer. And if I could ever be of help to anybody in terms of questions about what's going on in the harbor or with BHCC, just get in touch. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Anybody else? I don't know if Rick is still on. Just say a few words about the aquarium. I understand it's vacation week, correct? So hopefully the aquarium is geared up for that. I don't see Rick's name, but I do see Denny. Denny, are you still here? No.
Hi, how are you?
There you are. Welcome.
Likewise, thank you. Thanks for having us. Yeah, so we're super busy at the aquarium this week, almost sold out every day. Lots of little families around, and with some scheduled tour buses and school buses on campus.
Good, that's good news. That's good to hear. So,
Suzanne, Fernando has his hand up.
oh, you know why I can't see your hand? Because your hand is yellow and your background is yellow.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Well, I just wanted to pass along the good news. We finally got to start demo yesterday on the building. So if you see people in hard hats coming out of 21 Broad Street, that is why. If anyone sees anything that looks out of the ordinary down there, everyone has my information. So feel free to reach out. I'll be there every Tuesday at 2 o'clock from 1 to 2 as well. So I just kind of wanted to pass that along, and just thank everyone here for the support over the crazy COVID times of permitting and red tape and stuff. So just wanted to pass that along.
When do you expect to be able to open?
So fourth quarter of this year, fingers crossed for October, but another month or two is just another month or two. So December, I'm gladly okay with as well, but hopefully October of this year.
Good, good.
Nice.
Anybody else? Well, thank you all for attending and participating. And as I said, our next meeting is May 17th. And right now, we do have the BPD scheduled for the State Street project. So, and I'm sure there'll be other things that'll come up. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Suzanne. Bye.
Night.
Thanks. Good night.